Now is the time to set the foundation for the 2026 Ohio State season. And get this, within 3 months, winter workouts, mat drills, and spring football will be entirely over for the Buckeyes. And you know it. It's a Three Thoughts Thursday on the Beat, presented by the Waterworks. He is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. So, workouts underway. The work never really stops, Birm, but it's about to dramatically.
Yeah, it's weird because, again, I mean, we've kind of make this joke the last few years. There is just no off season. And the way that the season ends, immediately the day after, you start worrying about transfer portal losses and additions, and then all of a sudden you get through all that, and then you have to hire your next round of coaches, and then everything starts. So winter workouts begin. Players have arrived. I mean, all of the 26 early enrollees that signed with Ohio State in December are on campus and working out. The new guys are starting to pile in and get themselves into classes. We saw Brandon Ennis hanging out with Earl Little at the Ohio State basketball game on Tuesday night. Like, it's here we go. Like, the season's already underway again. So it's fun. It's good. It's nice that there isn't a lot of downtime to like sit and get sullen and salty about how the season ended, because now we can just spin it forward and say, hey, let's be optimistic again.
You've been sullen enough about the transfer portal and NIL and roster movement and everything else. So at least now, like, that part, 99.99% is over. Like, the portal is closed. You could still make additions. The NFL draft deadline has come and gone. Yes, the coaching staff moves are still out there and things can happen on that front. But like, we know who's going to be on the Ohio State roster this year with like almost near certainty, which means that we can dive into a little bit of a tradition on the Austin Birm Show, which is picking some dudes who need to be dudes in the weight room, or we can expand it through spring ball if we want, because I did say that it was a 3-month process you have to get through here. But this is where Mickey Marotti really earns his money. And where should we begin with the guys who need to make the most of this offseason stretch, Birm?
Well, I think what you brought up there, like, it has to include the spring, because generally the guys who like excel in the winter workout phase of the offseason also excel in the spring. That's sort of the way it works, because those are the guys who have spent this time period before spring practice starts in the beginning of March really diving in and going balls to the wall and committing to the program. So there's obviously a lot of guys who are going to be on this list and that we could talk about, but there's a handful of positions I think that specifically lend it themselves to needing a bigger upswing this year. I mean, there's guys like Brandon Ennis, who we're not going to really probably talk about on this show, who is going to be put in a position he's not been in his time at Ohio State. He's been like an emotional leader and a vocal leader, but now he has to be a physical leader. He has to be the guy who finds a way to elevate his game so that he can be a more valuable and more regular weapon for Ohio State come August, September, October, November. So he's not a guy that we're going to talk about, I don't think, or at least I'm not going to. But now that I think about how many guys are impacted, how many guys can actually make a difference over these next few weeks, it's pretty much everyone. Like, this is a clean slate. Ohio State, sure, they have guys that you think will be starters and guys that we know about and leaders of the team, but this is an opportunity for everyone to get better. And to me, like, it's going to sound stupid because it's certainly not the person I thought I'd talk about right now, but now I feel like it's imperative to talk about him, and it's Julian Sayin. Like, Julian Sayin has to take these next 5 weeks and absolutely destroy them and make sure that he comes out and is a different type of leader, a different, more emotional leader, a more present leader, a more vocal leader, and a guy that really attacks the weight room. Because as you saw throughout this season, it's little, how many, the last couple games, the 4th and 1s, the stuff like that, like, that just can't happen. I'm not saying Julian Sayin's ever going to be Will Howard size, of course, but if he needs to add 10, 15 pounds and put himself into that 6'1.5", 225 range so that he makes sure he's a little bit stronger in the pile, he has to do that. And so, for a guy that's a Heisman finalist and is going to be a first-round draft pick next year, like, there's still a lot to gain for him in these next 5-6 weeks.
Well, you've already named 2 players, Birm. I don't know how you're going to make it through the rest of the show. We thought it was 3 thoughts. You're 2/3 of the way there. Well, I don't look, but that's fine because we're going to name way more than 3 players. And
I just didn't think about Julian Sayin initially, and now I'm like, wait a second. There's nobody more important than Julian Sayin. Like, if this 2026 version of Ohio State is going to compete for a championship. It's going to be because Julian Sayin becomes better than he was. And he was really, really good for 12 games and then was pretty average in his last 2. Some of that's not on him. Some of that's on the offensive line. Some of that's on the scheme. Some of it's on all the other distractions. But he has to be the best quarterback in the country if Ohio State wants to go through that gauntlet of a schedule and have a chance to win a national championship.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely not wrong about any part of that. And what was one of the primary conversations about winter workouts, spring ball, and the summer last year? It was Lincoln Kienholz establishing himself as an Iron Buckeye, earning that praise for the way he worked out, the dual threat athleticism that he provided. We said all along he was never going to have the same ceiling as a passer as Julian Sayin. I don't think that working on accuracy or developing timing with Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Ennis or any of those wide receivers over the next 3 months is really that important for Julian Sayin, because we already know that he can do that. But the things that you mentioned, whether it's the quarterback sneaks or, the reps that are under his belt with diagnosing defenses and then being able to run, being able to execute, we've also seen him use his legs. And this is probably not ever going to be an offense that shifts to running Julian Sayin 10 times. Like, that's not going to be necessary. And that would be a disservice to what he does best. But I made this point with the offensive line, and we'll talk, I was going to talk about Ian Moore, and we still will, about the development of that group up front. They're never going to win 75 reps in a row against good defensive lines or even bad defensive lines. Sometimes it's up to your quarterback 5 or 6 times a game to make it right. And whether that's, shaking off a tackle, making a guy miss, extending a play outside, or running for a first down, Julian Sayin's going to have to do that. And a lot of that is going to be reliant not just on your experience and understanding Ohio State's playbook and being able to diagnose the defense that you're facing and knowing where your escape route might be, but it is also doing all of that dirty work in the weight room and in mat drills that you are better equipped to handle that physically. And also so that Ryan Day and or Billy Fessler or anybody else is like, you know what? It's okay to run Julian Sayin here once or twice a game because he's not going to get broken. And they did not have that fear with Will Howard. And I think you could understandably see why maybe they did a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very similar conversation to the CJ Stroud years or the Justin Fields year in 2020, where it's like, hey, if this guy gets hurt, we're in a lot of trouble. And you certainly can't live in fear when the offense needs to get 3 yards. You can't be that guy who says, well, I can get 6, but I need 7. That last yard's going to be a real pain in the butt to get, and I might get hit. But so I'll just throw it away. Like, that's, obviously at the end of the first half against Miami, there's a lot of people who saw, what we all saw and an opportunity to pick up some yards there. Instead, Julian threw it away. And, I don't know that being more physical in the weight room is going to change that mentality entirely. But I think once you start to see that you're capable of being that kind of leader, that kind of gritty quarterback, and not just the high execution, the polished quarterback, like, you have to be both in this game today in the way that college football is set up. And we watched it. Indiana's offensive line did not play particularly well against Miami, but Fernando Mendoza, to your point earlier, understood where pressure was coming from and moved himself around the pocket and got out of the pocket when he had to and did it quickly. Those are the things that Julian Sayin's experience will start to pick up on. But then it becomes the other side of it, which is how do you compete physically in the Big Ten, in the Big Ten that's now won 3 straight national championships and is going to have probably 3 of the top 5 teams in the country in its ranks to start the season again. So this is where you have to go.
I don't think anybody looks at Fernando Mendoza or Carson Beck and he's like, you know what, that is a real threat with the legs. But Carson Beck clinched the spot in the national championship with his legs and also beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl by getting a 3rd and 11 on a scramble, running for a touchdown against Ole Miss. And Fernando Mendoza etched his name into the history of college football with the 4th and 2 quarterback draw and the toughness he showed at the goal line. And there's no reason to think that Julian Sayin cannot do those things. But he wasn't quite ready to do that in year 1, which is not a slight on him. That's the normal order of things. You become better at that over time. And that's a combination of both the physicality and the middle part of the game. The other part that you mentioned, Birm, with Brandon Ennis, we know that he's a captain already. We know that he's earned plenty of plaudits for his work in the weight room and the tone that he sets there. And this is also not a suggestion that he was coasting, but he's going to be pushed in a different way for his job with Devin McEwen in there and his speed. and what maybe Kyle Parker can do with his versatility to play both in the slot or on the outside. I wonder, because again, it's not for a lack of effort on Brandon Innis's part, if just like the notion that there's more competition for him, what that might lead for him. I think that that's a good name to mention as well.
Yeah. Again, it's not necessarily, to go back to the Julian Sayin point, it's not like Ohio State was asking him to do a lot of that running stuff. And so will that change in year two if he proves more physical in this offseason, and if he puts on a couple, 10 extra pounds and gets a lot stronger, maybe they'll ask him to do more. That's kind of this weird catch-22. Like, yeah, he wasn't asked to do this, but is Ohio State not asking him to do it because he wasn't physically ready? So if he's more physically ready, will they do that? We'll see. A guy like Brandon, I think that point is properly made. Yeah, he could be a block O type recipient for Ohio State this year. But is he going to be more explosive than Devin McEwen or Kyle Parker? I don't know. So like the onus is on Brandon to go out and prove that over these next few weeks. There's Jeremiah Smith, and there's Austin Sareveld, and there's Luke Montgomery, and there's Carson Hinsman, right? And probably Phillip Daniels. Nothing else on the offense, I think, it should be set heading into the spring. Obviously quarterback, you know that Julian's the guy, but the other positions at wide receiver, the tight end room, all that stuff's up for grabs. And when there's new guys who come in with new motivations, players moving up from places like UTSA, or a player like Kyle Parker trying to salvage his career after leaving LSU and being back with a coach that trusts him, as Brandon is trying to learn trust with Cortez Hankton, like there's a lot of opportunity there for other people to take reps away from Brandon Innis. So this is a really important few week stretch for him, I think.
Yeah. So winter workouts aren't going to wait. Winter doesn't wait for you either. The Waterworks and Hetter Heating and Hetter Heating, Cooling and Plumbing is there to make sure your home is ready for these cold mornings, icy nights, and everything in between. Stay cozy all season long and call the Waterworks and Hetter Heating, Cooling and Plumbing at 614-232-2222. And physically, Birm.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to complain. You don't want to be complaining to people about the winter. You don't want to be sitting around pissing and moaning about the fact that you're cold because your heater doesn't work. And you also don't want to be pissing and moaning that you can't lose weight when Awaken 180 exists, and you can just go to awaken180weightloss.com and do what I've done over the last 5 weeks. I've lost 30 pounds in 5 weeks. I feel great. I know there's people who are like, oh, that's not sustainable. Of course it's not sustainable. Eventually I'd run out of weight. I'd be down to zero. That's why I go for my target weight, which I'm 1 week away from my hope of making it happen. And then it's about building back up through the good habits that I've learned and the new eating ways that I've learned, and through the coaching that will continue, through the program that will continue. So it's not like a guessing game. I'm not just riding it out, going week to week, going, well, can I keep doing it this week? Awaken 180 gives me the plan. Go to awaken180weightloss.com and join us on your 180 physically, because it's been awesome. And as you move into this offseason, Austin, I think about two positions that are really, really pivotal for Ohio State heading into the spring, where there's a returning guy that you feel like you should be able to count on. And then there's a bunch of question marks, including freshmen that had good moments and good years, but need major elevations. That's defensive end, and that is cornerback. So I know you wanted to start with defensive end, talking about Zion Grady, but I think that this conversation, and I couldn't find a photo of Zion Grady and Epi Satanale, because I think that they're one of the same. There was a lot of conversation last summer when Epi got into town about the way he quickly caught up to speed, but then he didn't get the reps throughout the season that Zion did. And as you look at the depth chart at defensive end, you've got Kenyatta Jackson, you've got Bo Atkinson. Bo obviously did not have the year I think people wanted him to have, and Zion elevated above him. Now is Epi Satanale and Zion Grady ready to take that next step and be not just quality depth, but guys who can get onto the field and actually contribute and make plays from the first whistle to the last whistle?
Yeah. And for me, the reason that I wanted to start with Zion Grady, and I agree with you, you can lump them both together, because this is, heading into sophomore seasons, year two, you always see these big leaps forward.
Austin has frozen.
Line has just become so pivotal. And then you see what Larry Johnson has always been able to unlock in these, defensive linemen. The longer he has them in there, the more familiarity they have with the system and what Mickey Marotti is doing with them to transform their bodies. But maybe it's just a product. Well, it's definitely a product of the fact that Zion Grady was on the field and that they trusted him in some spots that I didn't anticipate he would be in year one. I feel like he's closer, and maybe that would be a good argument for Epi Satanale, that he's going to have to take those strides to catch up with where Zion Grady apparently already was in the mindset of the defensive coaching staff last year. But, for me, it's not taking the next step to be a primary backup, be in the rotation for Epi Satanale. It is that somebody is going to have to take a starting job that Caden Curry had and that is opposite of Kenyatta Jackson. And I'd be putting down my chips right now that everything Zion Grady showed physically in year one, you enhance that, and it's going to be pretty potent in year two. Now, that's not to say that the guys that came in through the portal wouldn't be an option there, like Quay Rusaw, or what you're going to get out of Christian Aliagro as a versatile pass rusher is not important. But if you're talking about development inside the program, guys, we know like Zion Grady is where I'm looking first and foremost.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it's a conversation that extends throughout the entire position, I think, and that's the reality of the world we're living in. Ohio State has to replace not just its most productive sack guy from a year ago, but its heart and soul on the defense. And that's what Caden Curry was, but it's also what Sonny Styles was. It's also what Caleb Downs was. So like you have to find all these different layers and levels to replace these guys. And so this conversation, I think, starts with Epi and Zion because of their upside and because of what Ohio State chose when they decided to bring those guys back instead of going out and spending the money on Chaz Coleman or someone like that, for example, because that ultimately are what those discussions centered around. Like, hey, if you spend X amount of dollars on Chaz Coleman, the odds are you might lose Zion Grady because you're not going to be able to take care of him. And so when it came down to the rubber meeting the road, the choice was, well, we want Zion and we want Epi. And so now those guys are put in a position where like that trust that the coaching staff has put in them and is now like, you have to pay that back. And that also goes to Bo Atkinson, who again, people are going to gloss over and look at him as a guy that maybe you're like, well, I don't know that he really fits, or he didn't really stand out and create a role for himself, but that role is there. So, but it also goes to Quay Rusaw, like all these guys, like somebody has to be that guy opposite Kenyatta Jackson. And I think you're right in that Zion Grady is certainly where that should begin, just because of his size, because of the way he performed in year one, the trust they obviously showed in him in year one. But that entire position group has to have a really, really elevated spring and winter workouts. It's kind of the way that the defensive tackle room was last summer. Yeah. Like that's what you have to get out of the defensive ends this year. And I think Ohio State fans, I would be excited that you have this with 2 second-year guys in Satanale and Grady, who are pretty likely, I think, to take that opportunity and run with it. And then you add Rusaw, who's another second-year player in college football. And so you got a lot younger at defensive line, but I think you actually have a higher upside with this group than you did a year ago.
Yeah, and then you wanted to shift over there to Devin Sanchez, so we'll come back to the trenches and the offensive line to wrap it up on a Three Thoughts Thursday presented by the Waterworks. But Devin Sanchez is a really interesting one to me because he got a lot of high leverage snaps, and not all of them were great. And that is once again not an indictment of someone who's a true freshman and learning how to play the game at the highest level. I was pretty surprised at how quickly he earned some of those opportunities in September, or getting involved against, or late August against Texas, like right away that they put him out there in that spot. That continued throughout the season, and they didn't back away when he had some rough reps. Those are part of the growth curve in the learning process for true freshmen. Physically, you can look at him and you have no doubt. That's why he's a 5-star. That's why there is faith that he's going to get this done. I'd be curious really what Mickey Marotti and Tim Walton want him to accomplish over the next 3 months. That's not like on the field technical work. Like what tweaks, what strength, what would be the actual emphasis? What's the playing weight? Like I know some of those things don't maybe move the needle all that much in the grand scheme of things, but what's the thing that you're going to throw out there to motivate him, because he's already had a taste of playing time and he knows what he's going to have to do in coverage to get better. So what's the other part of that? Because I guess that's, can you hold up with the physical mentality of a Davis Igbinosun? Can you go up and stop the run? Would you have the ability to move around as Ohio State and Matt Patricia pull the puppet strings about how you want to line up in the secondary? I guess that's the conversation. I'd love to know that that's true though.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think for Devin, the thing that you brought up about Davis and Igbinosun and that mentality, I think is the step that has to be taken. But that can be taken during these next 6 weeks. Like when you change your mindset and say, hey, I am not going to be a second year guy just because I'm a second year guy. I can be a leader. And it's one of the messages I think that a lot of these young players who contribute are getting early, which is you don't have to wait your turn to be a leader. Like, you are the guy now. Like, Davison taught you how to act. Davison taught you how to behave in practice. Davison taught you how to handle your business and not let yourself get frustrated if you get beat on a play and bounce back. And Devin certainly got his, he got targeted a lot when he came into the games, especially early part of the year. Teams took advantage of him the same way they tried to do to Jermaine Matthews when Jermaine was a freshman, the same way they did to Jermaine last year at the end of the year because Davison was playing so well. Like, there's always a fish. So the goal for Devin has to be to not be the fish, right? So because he's going to play a lot, he is with Aaron Scott out of the program. You bring in Dominic Kelly from Georgia, and he's going to compete as well. But and Cam Calhoun. So now you have your core four, I think. But it's going to be Devin and Dave and Jermaine as the guys. So some of this is just Devin realizing that the expectations are what they are. It's kind of wild to be talking about college football and a guy going into year 2 and having to label it almost as like a money year. But like, it's a money year because now it's not just where are you positioning yourself on NFL draft boards heading into your draft eligible year, which would be 2027 for him. But Devin did not go into his Ohio State career demanding a bunch of big money, right? He loved Ohio State. He wanted to be there. He's obviously not there for free, but he certainly could have gotten a lot more money elsewhere. So if he wants that opportunity now, this is the year to do it. And so there can be no question coming out of spring ball. That's ultimately, like, if I was to measure success for Devin Sanchez this spring, does Devin Sanchez leave no doubt that every single starting rep for Ohio State needs to be Devin Sanchez and Jermaine Matthews? Because if he opens the door at all for Dominic Kelly, who played at Georgia, so it's a kid from a very similar pedigree of school. He understands what it takes. Similar size. Devin's a touch taller. Dominic's closer to 6'1.5", and Devin's closer to 6'3". But like, you can't leave the door open, because if you leave that door open for a new guy who comes into the program and you've already got a year of experience and that guy passes you, you never get it back, I don't think. So like that's really what it comes down to for Devin, is just making sure that physically he's not going to change a whole bunch. Maybe he adds another 5-10 pounds, gets himself up to that 205 range. But where does it really go other than mentally for him?
Yeah, it's a great point. And then I think as we've belabored that point really over the last couple of months, and especially in the wake of what happened against Indiana and Miami, what does this look like for the offensive line? Having Austin Birm and Carson Hinsman and Luke Montgomery back is hugely significant. And Philip Daniels in that same bucket with a year of experience and a chance for him, where Philip Daniels probably needs to get healthier more than he needs to add any weight and anything like that over these next 3 months. But there is a player I think that can really change this conversation, because it can allow Ohio State to get creative with the tackles if it needs to, letting one of them move to guard. Because I don't think, correct me if you disagree, Birm, but like, you look at Ian Moore, he's not someone that you say he's got positional versatility. You look at him, he is a tackle. He probably needs to stay at tackle. Now, what physically does he need to do to hold up for more than one half, which was a really productive half against Miami in the Cotton Bowl, or one start, which I believe was against Purdue when Philip Daniels was hurt, and that was positive. Like, you know that some of that taste of experience is out there and was good, but you have to build on that. If you're going to make a full-time move and force Tyler Bone and Ryan Day to say Philip Daniels or Austin Birm needs to move to guard for the betterment of Ohio State, there's only one person that I can see that can force that conversation to occur, and it's Ian Moore.
100%. And Ian, again, as you said, like, I think he acquitted himself pretty nicely in the opportunities he had. But now you have a chance going into year 3. You were a top 100 prospect. You were a highly recruited guy. You were like the tackle Ohio State signed in that class of 2024. You are maybe, as you mentioned, like, not just like a true tackle, but you might be the only true tackle on the entire roster. So you have an opportunity to really go out and cement your place. You have momentum coming off of a really good second half against Miami. You have the size. You have now 2 years of requisite experience. You have the skill set to be that guy. And you have opportunity because the other guys are so flexible. And you know, I know there's a lot of people who I think will scoff at the notion of moving Austin Birm because he played pretty darn well all season long for Ohio State at left tackle. But there is I don't want to say it's a requirement. It's maybe more of a obligation by Ohio State to try to put players in the positions that they're going to be at in the NFL, right? I think that there's that conversation. Obviously, Austin Birm has proven over the last 3 years he can play all the spots, and he's going to move around when he gets to the NFL. There's no doubt he's going to be a 4 position guy at least in the NFL. But Ian Moore is going to be a tackle, so let's see what he can do. And again, the opportunity to have like a true pass protecting left tackle, I think, is something that Ohio State would relish. It'll be really interesting to see what Tyler Bowen does this spring, and that will start with the winter workouts for Ian, because if he doesn't go out and really dominate in these next 5 weeks, he's going to eliminate the conversation about, hey, do we have to find a spot for Ian? Remember, it was last February when we started to hear people say Austin Birm is playing no matter what. Like we don't know where he's going to play, but he's playing. And
he was the only one in spring ball that they're like, he is a starter. And I was like, so Carson Hinsman's right there. Like Austin Birm is a starter. The rest we're going to figure out.
Right. So Ian has the opportunity to put himself in that position. The difference now is that there's 4 other guys that you're like, those guys are starters. So, so who is it? Ian who forces something else to happen and a move for Austin Birm, which then would probably move Philip Daniels inside, or maybe you move Austin's. I don't know. I just think that this is why you recruit really talented, really versatile players, and then you hope to find the best spot for them. But it's on them to earn the spot. And so what we've seen out of Ian, the fact that he's not already enrolled in school at Indiana, I think should be a win for Ohio State. So the fact that and again, we're in such a different era of college football. When you see Ohio State decide like, hey, this guy can't leave our program heading into year 3, even though he's not been a starter, then you should know that they have plans for that player. So Let's see what those plans are, because the opportunity is there for Ian Moore. And I think that in the moments he had, I think he really did a nice job. And it's a similar conversation for Josh Padilla. It's a similar conversation for Bennett Christian. Like there's a lot of these conversations that you can have around this roster as you head into a season that a lot of people are going to look at and say, well, who does Ohio State really have? Who do they lean on? There's a lot of leadership, the Saravelds, the Christians, the Brandon Innes's of the world. But now you have to find like elevated talent. And Ian Moore as left tackle is a higher ceiling prospect than Austin Birm, which is silly because Austin's like Iron Buckeye and captain and all that. But this is what spring football is for, right? You got to go out and tinker.
Yeah, and there's a lot more names, of course, that we'll get to on the Ohio State roster when we start ramping up the position review, preview, rewind, fast forwards in the days ahead. Because what I said, this next 3 months still going to be busy. Ohio State's already got like all of that planned out with when workouts are, when the practices will begin, when that spring game will be officially announced, although I expect it will be on April 18th if you want to start planning accordingly. I think Ohio State would want everyone to know when that's going to be, so you can make sure that weekend is available.
Yes, April 18th seems like a very reasonable day for such a conversation.
Yeah, I would circle that one. So we'll get into all of that in the days and weeks ahead. And of course, the new tradition on a Freaky Friday foursome in the mailbag. If you made it this far, you already know that we need you to send in your questions. It can be lighthearted, can be serious, can be whatever you want. Send those to the Austin and Birm Show at gmail.com. That is the Austin and Birm Show at gmail.com. And we will pick a handful, let's say 4 of them on Friday to get into. We'll do that all year long on The Beat, presented by the Waterworks. Thanks for joining us on a 3 Thoughts Thursday, though. He is Birm. I am Austin. We will talk to you tomorrow.